Through the word and sacrament, and by faith, the Holy Spirit also works humility. Just a little. Small beginning, small growth, but he does work humility. Because he strengthens us and causes us to grow in grace, and this grace too. And humility comes from the new man implanted in us in regeneration. That's the principle of humility, as of all the other graces. This parable of the seats at the wedding feast deals with humility. First of all, of course, we need to understand the scene. Luke 14, from verse 1 all the way to verse 24, most of the chapter, is set in the house of a Pharisee, a chief Pharisee, a leading man, and it's on a Sabbath day, Sabbath afternoon, or Sabbath evening. Jesus, with others, has been invited. And he was not invited out of love for him, but out of hatred. They hated him, and therefore they invited him. Because they wanted to trap him. As verse 1 says, it came to pass, as he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day, that they watched him. They watched him. They watched him to see if he would do something wrong. Have him relax, have him eat with them, get close to them, and then see if they could trap him. If they could use something he said or something he did in order to condemn him and run him down later. Do not ever invite anybody into your house with this sort of motivation. The reason to invite someone to your house is to feed them and fellowship with them. It's not to make your table a snare in order to accuse them if they step out of line in some way that your evil eye perceives them to have erred. Because that's wicked. That's what these people were doing. They were playing with Christ, toying with him to trap him. And there's a man there, either at the feast or perhaps outside the house or on the way to the house, in the doorway, let's say, and he is afflicted with dropsy. This is named, not quite commonly, but this is the modern word for it, edema. And it is a condition whereby, so says the dictionary, one suffers from an excess of watery fluid in the cavities or tissues of the body. A swelling. Now, given that Jesus has been invited, and given that these men are out to trap him, this man's being around the door or en route as Jesus is going in is probably to be understood as part of the trap. Along with this ulterior motive to bring Jesus there to catch him, they have this man standing around as the bait to snare Jesus. If Jesus doesn't heal him, maybe he doesn't have the power to heal him. Maybe he doesn't love the man. We've got him. And if Jesus does heal him, it's the Sabbath day, you see, and he's a Sabbath breaker. Got him. That's the attitude with these people. Jesus asks two questions, one before and one after he heals this man. The question before is this, verse 3. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? What do you think? The question after is, which of you shall have an ass or an ox fallen into a pit, and will not straightway pull him out on the Sabbath day. And then yeah, we do that. Well, if you do that, then how could it possibly be wrong to heal a man that's sick? A man that's sick. And there's no answer. No answer. And not just these two questions, but Christ also delivers 3 parables, all concerning feasts or dinners, building upon the nice, cozy setting that they have together in this Pharisee's house. The first parable deals with the itch for the best seats, verses 7 through 11, that we're going to consider more fully later. Then verses 12 to 14 addresses the issue who to invite to the feast. What sort of people? And then verses 15 through 24 deals with the making of excuses in order to decline the invitation to the great feast, which is a picture of the kingdom of heaven. So let's consider then this rather awkward, and we might even say a rather stressful meal. As I've said, Christ is surrounded by his enemies. They've planted a trap for him, this man with the dropsy, and they're trying to catch him with his words. That's not a very pleasant environment. If I had an invitation like that, I would decline it. No interest in going to somebody's house if that's the attitude. But there's also another ill wind blowing through this house. There's a certain amount of strife among the other guests. There are, according to verse 3, Pharisees and lawyers present. And lawyers are those who are experts, as they think, in the Old Testament law. And they're trying to get the best seats. This unseeming hurrying forward and heading each other off to get into the best seats. And then, as well as these two things, as well as the Pharisees and lawyers trying to trip up Christ, and then the Pharisees and lawyers fighting over the best seats, oh, this was a delightful evening's meal. Christ then turns the tables on his enemies with these two penetrating questions about the Sabbath day in verses 3 and 5. Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? Well, what would you do if your animal fell into the ditch? And the 3 searching parables about feasts. And I dare say afterwards that these Pharisees, who invited Jesus with wicked motives, wished they had not invited Christ, because he exposes here their wickedness, especially as it's manifested in pride. Consider then the exaltation of the humble. First, as this applies to what I'm calling table manners, and second, as this applies to kingdom principles. Exaltation of the humble with regard to table manners and kingdom principles.